Hello, everyone, and welcome to Client-Side Data. So I hope that by the end of this lesson, each and every single one of you will be able to get data from forms and store data in local storage. Okay, so let's work on the first objective here. So getting data from forms. Let's see, best way to do this. Let's do this in a sandbox. So head over to Code Sandbox, if you'd be so kind. Make a vanilla template. Blow out the boilerplate. And I'll give you a second to get caught up.
He said to do vanilla again, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's make a form. So head over to index.html, and then somewhere in this body, doesn't matter where. We're gonna make a form tag. Does not need to have a method or an action. And we're gonna do something like first name, last name. So make a label for first name. It's going to be for something with the ID of first name. It's going to be text. ID of first name. It also needs a name property. And then make one for last name too. And then we need a way to submit the form. So my preference is usually input type submit. Maybe something kind of like that. All right, take a second to get caught up. Your screen should look like mine. While you're catching up, questions about any of this? We did a lot of this stuff in the first unit too, so it shouldn't be too bad.
Does the for within label need to be matching these input values, such as for ID and name?
Just the ID.
Just the ID needs to match.
Yeah, so we could keep the name the same, And that can be fart and fart as long as those match up. But
Excellent.
for is looking for a matching ID. Name is what we're going to use in JavaScript to get the value out. So once you've got this form in here, we can do a little bit of styling to make this look a little less fugly. So if we go over to styles and say that label and input, so using our comma combinator, both the label and the input should be display block. Hey, already, that was all it took to make something look a little bit more form-like. I'm also going to put a bottom margin on the input. Okay, that's a little bit better. Could also say that the labels are font size 16 pixels. Is that what they are now? What if we knock that down to 12? Hey, that looks a little nicer. Make them a little bit gray. Maybe darker than that. A little darker. There we go. That's pretty good. And then put a little bit of padding in here. I'm going to put more on the top than I do on the sides. So like 8 pixels on the top, 4 pixels on the sides. Maybe just 8 pixels all around. Hey, that looks pretty good. Cool, I'll take it. Your styles don't have to be exactly the same as mine, but you should have some of them. Take a sec to get caught up.
Kyle, could you show the HTML file one more time? I guess I missed the button at the bottom. I got the form, but not the button. Ah, okay.
Input type submit. You could also use button type submit. That'll do it too. Slightly different use cases. The finer points of which are covered in the reading.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, so we've got a styled form. The problem is, if I try to do anything with this form right now, watch what happens to the URL when I submit this. It just refreshes the page, and oh, because it's not a real browser. It's like just kind of rendering this. I can't actually go anywhere else. You can sort of see it like really briefly. It flashes. Shoot. But that whole thing where it's refreshing and setting the form, that means it's not working. So to make it work, one simple thing. You are going to forget this all the time. I still forget it sometimes. So this is going to happen to you also. We want to select the form element in JavaScript. We want to attach an event listener to the form. We want to listen for the submit event. And then in the event handler for this is going to take in the event.prevent default. That's going to make it so that now when I try to submit this form, I can just wail on that button and nothing happens. I have prevented the browser's default way of handling forms, and I'm saying, nope, I got it all. I'm just going to take care of it inside of this function myself. Most important thing about forms you have to know. Questions about this?
Is submit just one of those classic event listener kind of events? You don't need to assign it? Okay, awesome.
Yep. It is generated by forms whenever you do something that submits the form. Another mistake would be listening for the click event on the button. There's a lot of different ways to submit a form. For example, if I highlight that and hit the space bar, that also submits it. If I get to the last line and hit enter, that also submits it. And you do this stuff without thinking all the time on web forms. So that's why we want to listen to the submit event for the form so that we can handle all the different ways that forms are submitted.
Kyle, in the reading about the event prevent default, it mentions what it does, but so really, and in this case, we're doing it so it just keeps all the data in our form. But practically, for practicality, when would we use that?
You're using that if you're not making a web application.
Okay.
So once upon a time, the way this worked was we had our browser showing static HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Actually, forms even go before JavaScript existed. So you'd have these things, and then how would you do something interactive? How would you sign up for the Beanie Baby waiting list or whatever was happening in 1995? So you would fill out one of those forms, and you would say a method and an action. And so your browser would send an HTTP request with that method to the URL listed in the action, and it would take all of the inputs that you had and then make key value pairs out of the names and the values, and it would send it to wherever that action URL was. And on the other side, this was a PHP server or a Java server or a Rails server or whatever. It takes that data, it does whatever it wants to do with it, and what it sends back is a new URL to load. Totally different than how we do it now, where we're expecting data to come back from that. This is saying, all right, well, whenever you finish doing this, I want you to tell me where I need to go next. And so maybe what that is go to the confirmation page saying that yeah, this we added it correctly. Or go back to a listing page, but our listing page is actually generated by PHP and has the new item that you just added. That is the traditional behavior of forms. We don't want to do any of that. We don't want to, and also submitting a form effectively ends that page, because you're going to get a new page as soon as that thing comes back, and it's going to reload and start the whole thing over again. So what we want is, no, don't reload the page. We're in modern day. So we want to handle how that's going to be, that data is going to be sent ourselves. We're going to handle any data that comes back. We could still redirect if we want to, but we'll handle all of that ourselves with JavaScript. We won't just wait for the server to tell us what the next page is. So that was the original design of forms. That's the default behavior that we are preventing. I would not be surprised if you never do it in your career. Other questions about any of this so far?
I was looking at this just before the lecture, and instead of the submit event, I was looking at the event called change.
Mm-hmm.
And is that similar to that you could hit the button?
No.
It would still.
So
no?
what you would do with change. If I maybe grab the last name ID. Last name. Okay, so I grab this last name thing. If I listen to the change event on that, throw open the console over here. So when I type in this one, nothing. When I type in this one, as soon as I like unfocus that, it fires the change event. And so I might use that to verify that the password requirements were met, or that the password that you entered here was the same as the password you entered up here. You've changed the value of the input, so you could do something. Another one that you'd see if you want to do that in like real time is the input event. So nothing there. You can see it racking up just as I type. Every single character fires this thing. We could take a look at the particular character that was added. So that would be like event.target.value. And now A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where those get used. Other questions so far? Cool. So we've prevented the default behavior, but now we don't really have... Now we need to write the rest of the form. So the way that you get data out of a form is like that. I would not worry too much about figuring out what every little part of this means. You can just memorize it. That's okay. Event.target is the form element itself. That gets passed into this thing. This is called a constructor. And then the thing that you get back is... It works a lot like class list does, where it lets us get data out of that form. This one has a capital F, this one has a capital D, this one has a lowercase f, and a capital D. If I want to get those values, I get them by their name. So name, first name is going to be formData.get the string first name. Note that that matches up with this name over here. It doesn't match the ID, and it doesn't match like the name of the variable or anything like that. It's looking for an input that has a name property, a name attribute of first dash name. And that's date, not date.
Do you have to do a const on it first? Well, I guess that is your const.
Yeah, so yeah, we're assigning it into a variable so that we can do something with it. Okay, so if I pull out that first and last name and just log them, then I should be able to put Kyle and Coberly and submit the form. And there I am. And what you've hopefully been seeing with things like the query string stuff, the API data coming back, once we have this stuff in a variable, we can do whatever the hell we want with it. We can make sure that certain characters were used or that it matches a thing. We can loop through stuff. We can find things with it. Like, the hard thing is just getting it into JavaScript. That's how we get data that was entered in a form into JavaScript.
So when I was doing it for my website, I ended up using, what was it? Window local storage. Is that just demonstrably worse than doing it like this?
No, that is what the second half of this lesson is.
Oh, cool.
Because we're still not doing anything with the data. We just got it into JavaScript.
Okay.
And remember, you never need a window.anything. Window is the global object. So window.local storage and local storage are the exact same thing. Window.fetch and fetch are the exact same thing. Window.document.querySelector is the same thing as document.querySelector.
So if you were not preventing default, not calling that method, and say it did load a new page, that data persists to the next page load?
Nope. All it did was get it in JavaScript. So if I don't do that, and I put A and B there, I'm not even sure that it'll make it this far. It might, right before it refreshes. Yeah, it did. And then it refreshed.
Okay.
Still haven't done anything with it yet. Just got it into JavaScript. Like took it out of HTML where the user was entering in this this input element, making it so that we can put it in a variable and compare it to things and send it in fetch requests and all that kind of stuff. Cool. So that's getting data out of forms, and that's really it. What we do with the data, we could throw those in a fetch request. So like, for example, this is like a user sign-up thing. I send this to the my user sign-up url.com/signup, whatever. So like wherever this data is supposed to go. And then I also give it an object telling it that I want it to use HTTP post. I want to tell it that the format that I'm using for this data is JSON. And that the data that I'm sending over is json.stringify first name, last name. So if I wanted to pull this data out of the form and then send it in a fetch request, it might look like that. And then I can, it's a promise, so I can take a look at the response that got added. I could take that parsed response and I'd like maybe take the entire form out of the page. So it'd be like form.remove and then add success message. So like I could do something like that. That's an example of manually handling the form submission behavior. Or I could do something like we're actually going to do for the second objective of this lesson, which is store this stuff in local storage. So before we do any of that, questions about getting data out of forms?
Do you always need some sort of submit button or submit type thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so like if you had a drop down and without a button where it just selects,
sure.
the person selects.
So like those fire change events also. So let's say I have another form. And I have a select. And it has a name of Pokemon and an ID of Pokemon, but otherwise no submit button. And this is going to be ID Pokemon selection. Okay, so I've got a select in there. It doesn't have any options, but I could do something like grab my Pokemon selection form. And maybe I want to listen to the change event inside of that select. By the way, I haven't seen a lot of people pick up on this. So we can document.querySelect or something. You can also element.querySelect or something. So that looks like this. So the select dropdown is going to be not document.querySelector, but Pokemon selection form.querySelector. That's more like how to select anything kind of stuff. But I can grab that select, and then maybe I want to fetch something from the Pokemon API. This could be like pokeapi.co API v2 Pokemon. So that's going to give me that list. And then I can take the response, parse it. I can take that response. The list of Pokemon is in response.results. All right, so I have an array of Pokemon objects, and I want to turn that into an array of options. So I could do something like strip it down to their names, like Pokemon list .map. Take a Pokemon, get their name. All right, so now I have an array of strings. So then I can map over those and take each name and make an option out of it. Document.create element option. And then set the options value to the name, and then set the text content to the name, and then return the option. Okay, so now I've turned an array of Pokemon objects into an array of name strings, and then taken each of those strings, use them to make an options object, and then I can each over those. For each option, append it to the select. And then all we have to do is figure out what I did wrong. So let's clear that. Let's refresh. Okay, not seeing anything there. So now what I want to figure out is, like, did the network event actually fire? That would have been an XHR request. Not to any of these. Refresh there. There it is. I wonder why that never came back. How strange. Ooh. Is it blocked? Did I type the URL wrong? Because that absolutely has a CORS response.
It looks right.
pokeapi.co /API/v2 https://pokeapi.co not .com /API/v2/Pokemon. I might be getting throttled. That could absolutely be part of this because I've been teaching these lessons on the Poke API. All right, the Star Wars.
Maybe it blocks sandblocks.
It could also be blocking the sandbox, except like I also do this in the sandbox all the time. So like that doesn't make sense. Oh, hey, there they are. Saw them. Hang on. There they go. Check it out. A dynamically created drop-down thing. And then if I want to listen for, like, for example, that change event, that change event's fired by the select. So that's going to be like select dot add event listener on the change event. You selected event.target.value. So the value of that input. All right, let's see if it works. Go from Bulbasaur to Ivysaur. Cool. So can I also, instead of just console logging this, make a DOM node and then throw it onto the page? Or look up more details about that specific one because I have its name? Yeah, I could absolutely do that. Could I save it in local storage as I'm like making a list of my favorite Pokemon? Yeah, I could absolutely do that. More questions about forms.
I have one, not to go back a few steps or anything, but why after the new was form data capitalized with the F and the D?
Sure. These are totally different things. So like that could be a completely unrelated name. The reason why it's the first letter is capitalized is that form data is a class. And we really haven't talked about those yet, and we probably won't for a while still.
Okay.
We've got another 4 weeks, I think, until we have to talk about classes. But those are like built-in blueprint kind of things in a lot of programming languages. And so this new keyword that like we really don't use anywhere else, like that's also part of that, which is why I'm saying maybe don't worry so much about what this is or why it works. Take my word for it.
Right, so in VS Code, it's one of those that turns green.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, oh, it's magic.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Other questions about forms? All right. I want to talk about local storage. Now, luckily, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this because there's not that many things you can do with it, but you can do enough. So local storage is like a database that's in your browser. It is specific to any particular site, not a page. They're shared across different pages within the same domain. But otherwise, you can store data there and you can read data there that persists in between requests. So if, for example, I have this first name and last name, we don't need to worry about it, this Pokemon stuff. Oops, I'm going to tuck that guy up there too. All right, so we don't have to worry. We have this data here. Let's say we wanted to store it. What we could do is local storage dot set item. Set item takes two things. It takes the name of a key and a value. A key value thing just keeps coming back, man. So these don't need to be exactly the same. We could go back using kebab case like that. You do the same thing for last name. Cool. This is just like making a variable that is like a variable in your browser, not like a variable on this page or in this scope. And like they're scoped to the entire site. So you can set them anywhere, you can read them anywhere. So like that might be something like I wonder if it'll let me see it inside the sandbox. Go over here. Nope. Storage. All right, so if I put in first name and last name and sign up, did I put it inside the sandbox or did I put it inside here? Oh, there they are. So it put those in local storage. Well, bully, who cares? What's cool about this is that I can also read those out. This was loaded from local storage. Local storage.get item. Local storage.get item. Last name. So that was loaded out of local storage. What happens when I refresh the page? Hey, I still have it. Pretty cool.
Can I see what you typed in again?
Yep.
Okay, well,
So this is how I set it. This is how I read it.
Oh, okay. You separated the lines. Okay. Thank you.
I guess why did you have to set it and read it the same way? Kind of looks almost the same.
So
or call it.
So like keep in mind that every time I refresh this, it's reloading this page. I don't actually even need the form submission thing anymore. Oops. So if I get rid of that, it doesn't even have the submit listener anymore. It's still reading this out of local storage. Let's draw the like sequence of events on that. So I've got a browser and a file server. I asked for the page. It gives it back to me as well as the CSS. Well, I then request the CSS, request the JavaScript, all that kind of stuff. Attach those event listeners. And then over here, just in user land, I fill out a form. And save the data in local storage. Then, if in a completely unrelated request, I say, yo, can you give me that page? And it gives me the data back. That data is still there. So imagine this. You're making an app where people keep track of their favorite Pokemon. Okay? You can get all that Pokemon data from the Poke API. You can't add anything to it, though. You can't keep a list of Sharon's favorite Pokemon. All right, then how do you make the app without having a backend where we're in a database where we're storing all this stuff? Well, we can do that here. We could say that, like, hey, the IDs of Sharon's favorite Pokemon are 11, 23, and 57. And then the next time that we load that page, we can read the data out. And since this is in the browser, Sharon's browser and Sarah's browser and Kyle's browser and Matt P's browser don't have anything to do with each other. So we all have our own like personalized version of it. It's pretty cool, right?
But how do you as a site owner save the data that a user enters?
Like that. Now you don't have I don't have access to that. So when you save your things just in local storage, I don't have access to that. I don't know what you saved.
How would you? Or is that another lesson?
That's another unit. So how you would do that. So we've got a file server and an API server. So you request the file, you get the file back. You fill out a form. You send that to the API that like you control. That sends that to a database. API sends that back down to you. So then the next time you load the page, you go, by the way, have I saved anything in the database? The browser asks the API that. API looks it up in the database, returns it back, sends it back down to the browser. So like that's how the LMS works. If I'm thinking about if I want to show you this. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second. There's a sensitive thing that somebody on YouTube could watch and fucking torch this database. Give me just a sec.
Our pre-work website, I was doing my best, doing everything to figure out how to have a comment page. I ended up having to go through a third party that would save it.
Yep. Absolutely. So there we go. Yeah, that would have been a mighty tall order to have a comments page that other people can see. But if I want to like say, hey, what are all of the submissions? Oops, is it? Select all for, performance they're called. So this is all of every record in the database. And so this first one was a prompt. And I said, are you ready to go? Remember this from day one? One of you said, that was Lauren, said, ready, Freddie. And so all of this stuff just lives in a giant ass database. Everything that any of you have ever done in the program. And so when you load up the page, it's going to go to my server. It's going to look up your performances and your evaluations and then bring them back to the browser.
So is local storage kind of like we're making like our own cookies, so to speak?
This is an alternative to cookies. Does kind of the same thing.
Okay.
Gets used in a lot of the same cases. But yeah, local storage is more like you have your own teeny tiny database that you can just use directly.
But say you had a web page with a form data, and I heard it was possible to take the input from a user and save it to a document in that's set up in your page. But I mean, is that even possible?
No, you can make a DOM node and add it to the page. So like, for example, as part of this whole process, I could make a new thing and say that document.createElement p.textContent equals first name, last name, like so, and then just throw it onto the end of the body or something. Document query selector. So if I do that and fill out something on the page, so you can do it that way, but it doesn't save the file. You don't own the file. We're not even using the HTML anymore. Remember, it got discarded as soon as it got turned into the DOM. And just in general, browser apps can't write to files. That's like a security thing. It'd be awfully scary if every website that you interacted with could interact with the file system on your computer. You don't want that. They just modify files on there. So no, there's no way purely client side to like rewrite a file. Now, what you can do is use local storage, which is like your own personal private database. But the API doesn't have access to that. Yours is completely unrelated to mine or Scott's or Brad's, but you can save data there. So what if we were trying to keep track of a list of things in local storage? Well, one of the limitations of local storage is that it's all strings. So we can't do objects, we can't do arrays, we can't do any of that kind of stuff. Well, that's a tragedy. What can we do? Well, it turns out it's actually not that hard to work around. So let's say I have person here. And as a reminder, this is object shorthand syntax. It's the same as this. Okay, so now I've got this person that I made out of whatever the user signed up with. Instead of appending that to the page, what if I want to add that to a list of everybody who signed up in this browser? So I might do something like make a people array and push person into it. But somebody who's done this unit, well, I can't, that doesn't help me with local storage though, because I have this array. Who did the reading on that and remembers how we get around that?
Turn it into a JSON string.
Turn it into a JSON string. Now, I think just an array, I don't think that can be a JSON string, but close enough. So we could do something like people JSON is json.stringify people. And then now people JSON is a string. So I could do local storage dot set item people to people. So I have a hunch. I'm a little concerned it might bark at me because I don't think an array can be a top level thing in JSON. Let's see what happens. Kyle Coberly. Nope, worked fine. So so I throw that into local storage, and then maybe whenever the page loads, everybody who's previously signed up, I pull those out of local storage and throw them on the page. So that could be something like, first I need to get something out of local storage. So people is local storage get item people. And then people dot let's see, parsed people json.parse. So it takes the JSON string and turns it back into a JavaScript object. JSON.parse people. Why doesn't it like that? Yeah, I think it was something about how this encoding works. The way that you get around that is if like, you can only stringify an object. Cool. So make it an object. And all right, so when I make a mistake, how do I do that? Well, local storage dot clear. Refresh that. Everything's out of local storage now. All right, back over here. JSON.stringify, put the people in there, set the item, and then I need to pull out that particular array when I'm trying to get this item out. All right, cool. And I can say, all right, if, let's see. I'm going to call this maybe encoded people. And then I can do like some kind of conditional that's like if this was set at all, then try parsing it. And then this is going to be like destructure people out of parsed people. And then let's see what we get back there. All right, let's see if it works. Okay, cool. Got down to the bottom of this. Logged that just fine. Now what happens when I refresh? Oop, didn't like something in the JSON there. So it's still mad about something down here. And I imagine it's because I'm not actually storing the thing that I'm supposed to be storing. So once more, make a mistake. Local storage.clear takes everything out. Not a problem anymore. Try submitting. Cool. Refresh. Hey, look! I got back a person object. That's pretty dope. What if I put Matt in here and I put Scott in here? And I put Sharon in here. Okay, so now if I refresh this page, oops, did it not? Oh, it's because I'm not reading what's already in people yet. Ugh, this is getting complicated. So, point is that we can take data and keep it in the in local storage, and then retrieve that back, and then just do stuff with it. So like maybe before, like what people really should be is something kind of like this, where I am pulling out the encoded people, and then if there's anything there, let's say like people is, if there are encoded people, then I want it to be whatever they are. Otherwise, I want them to be just an empty array.
Is the question mark a fancy way of doing if statement?
It is a fancy way of doing an if statement. But what's cool is that, like, so these are called ternaries. They evaluate to something too. So, like this evaluates to whatever that is. So I can assign it into a variable, or I can assign that into a variable. You can't do that with if statements, which makes these cooler. All right, let's see if that works. All right, refresh. look, we're both in there now. Cool. And if I refresh, hey, look, 3 people in there. So now, if these encoded people are in the game, well, could I not map over them and make DOM nodes? Like, is document.create element li.text content is person.first name and person.last name. And then take each of those and then throw them onto the page. So maybe I have like a container over here that's signups. Okay, so I've got the signups thing. Append person. Hey, look, these people have signed up. Hit that. I could also have something in this submit listener that like just adds them to that list. Just does this part of it for the thing that I just made. Otherwise, when I refresh, there's AMP. So that's how you can do some of this, like, it's like having a database, but just for you. And really, the only things that you need to know in local storage, get item, set item, and then when you get in trouble, .clear. If that's the only thing that you know how to do with local storage, you can save data. That's pretty cool. Ask me some questions about local storage.
So the local storage is just dependent on like what you have like locally, like your resources, right? Like it's not like a set limit on how much you can store in local storage, correct?
That's a good question. There is, but like I don't think it's even public information. How big can local storage get? It's like 15 megabytes. There you go, 5. Not a ton. Now keep in mind, it's 5 megabytes of text. That's enormous. That is so much data. That is I think the size of the entire LMS right now. All of the data. So we're talking about tens and thousands of records. Is probably about 5 megabytes of data. So quite a bit.
When does it get cleared?
When the user specifically does it. So if I go to like one of the settings that's like delete my shit or whatever. What is that? History. Manage history. So yeah, if you use like, I don't know, one of your browser tools for like blowing out information, that's one way to do it. As a developer, you can be a little bit more targeted with it if you, come on now, there we go. You can like go over here and then find this and then just like, so there's the data. You just specifically delete it. Or the browser does it on its own at like regular intervals, but like you don't control that. But it'll be things like, I'm running low on space, and this data hasn't been accessed in 3 months, so it just deletes it for you. But it's not considered like permanent storage. More questions?
So this would be preferable to using a query string to pass like objects?
No, not necessarily. So,
okay. Because that's how I had my production website set up before this class. So I'm
sure. You use them both. So when you pass something in a query string, like that's for anyone. So if you go to your like Pokemon page and you go to Pokemon / or Pokemon.html query string ID 3, anybody should be able to go to that page and see that Pokemon. So like that's really the only way to do that. Versus doing something in local storage, that's specific to that user. So you might use both of those and go, all right, when I'm on that particular Pokemon's page, I want to click a button that adds that ID to like an array or something. And then when I go back to my main page, it shows the list of Pokemon that I've favorited. That's personal to me. That's not part of the URL. So that's like how you would use query strings and local storage together to build an app.
Okay. Because yeah, I was just taking my form data and passing it through a query string to my next page for my results of my search.
Sure. So yeah, you can do it that way, but yeah, keep in mind that that means that no one else will be able to see that.
Okay.
Works though. Cool. Other questions about local storage? All right, we have gotten data from forms. We have stored data in local storage. So that's client-side data. Really not a ton to it. What we do with those things is like limitless. So enjoy playing with some client-side data. All right, that's the end of that lesson.